Hey there, beautiful souls. Have you ever had that feeling in the pit of your stomach? That quiet voice whispering something isn't right in your world? I ignored mine for months, watching my husband of 20 years slowly become a stranger in our home. Then one decision changed everything. I tracked him with a drone and discovered his secret life wasn't just an affair. It was so much worse. I've spent 19 years building a successful photography business in Barta County, Georgia. 19 years capturing other people's happiest moments while creating my own alongside my husband, Derek. At least, that's what I thought we were doing. My name is Cassie Hayes. I'm 43, and until recently, I believed I knew what my life was. Sure, my career takes its toll. The late nights editing wedding photos, the weekends spent capturing other people's love stories instead of living my own. But I had Derek for over 2 decades. Derek Barrett was my rock, my constant, my forever person. We have a daughter, Lily, who left for college 3 years ago. She's studying marine biology in California, chasing her dreams of saving the ocean. Sometimes weeks pass without hearing her voice, but Derek and I managed the empty nest transition. At least, I thought we did. Our house isn't anything extravagant, but it's ours. Every photo on the wall tells our story. Vacations, anniversaries, Lily's milestones. After Lily left, I figured Derek and I would reconnect, find ourselves again in the quiet spaces. I'd finish my photography sessions, come home to him, and we'd build this new chapter together. We had enough. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Stable. That's what I believed, anyway. I started learning drone photography to expand my business. Wedding couples were requesting aerial shots of their venues, and real estate agents needed property aerials. Nothing fancy at first, just a new skill to keep my business competitive. Then I realized I love the perspective. Seeing the world from above gave me a sense of peace when client demands got overwhelming. It felt good creating something beautiful, instead of just documenting other people's happiness. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things changed with Derek. He started working late at his accounting firm, going on weekend, golf trips with his friend Nathan Turner. I never liked Nathan. 2 divorces and a reputation for living faster than his income could sustain. But Derek always had good judgment. I trusted him. Then the coldness crept in. Conversations shortened. He stopped asking about my photo shoots or looking at my drone footage. Everything I said seemed to irritate him. Can you believe this new camera lens? I remember saying one night, unpacking a $2,000 telephoto I'd saved for. It'll revolutionize my portrait work. Derek barely looked up from his phone. Another expense? His voice held something I'd never heard before. Contempt. Don't you think it's time for real investments instead of camera equipment? This isn't just equipment, I said, feeling heat rise in my neck. I've got 3 wedding bookings next month because of my technical skills. He rolled his eyes. Great. More weekends you're working. That's when it started. The arguments about money. According to Derek, my business wasn't growing fast enough. Meanwhile, his closet filled with new suits, designer watches, expensive cologne, price tags he'd conveniently remove before I could see them. I handle our investments, he told me, during one particularly vicious fight. I'm securing our future while you're playing with cameras. Playing? I couldn't believe my ears. I've built this business from nothing. It's paid half our mortgage for 15 years. He wanted a new car to replace his 2-year-old luxury sedan, while I still drove my 8-year-old SUV. When I suggested a weekend in the mountains, just us, he already had plans at the lake with Nathan. 5th time in a row. I realized one night, lying alone in our bed, that we hadn't been intimate in 5 months. When I mentioned it, he frowned like he couldn't recall the last time. Let's go out Friday, I suggested. Dinner at Giovanni's? I've got a client meeting, he said without looking up. Saturday? I'm exhausted, Cassie. Can you stop pressuring me? Pressuring? That word landed like a slap. 20 years together, and suddenly I was pressuring him by asking for dinner. The signs accumulated. His phone never left his hand. Always on silent, screen, always turned away. He disabled our location sharing on Life 360, the app he had insisted on when I started traveling for destination weddings. He'd been worried about my safety in unfamiliar cities. I remembered how he used to introduce me at firm events, pride in his voice. This is my wife, Cassie Hayes, the photographer whose work you see in Coastal Living. Now, 6 months without an invitation to anything related to Barrett and Maddox Accounting where he worked. The last company party I attended, I'd watched his partner Gregory Maddox holding court, expensive suit, younger wife named Valerie hovering nearby while he placed his hand too low on a female accountant's back. I didn't like the way Maddox operated, but Derek said I was being old-fashioned. That's just how business relationships work these days, he'd say dismissively. I had no proof of anything, just changes that all began after he'd partnered with Maddox. Now I sleep alone most nights. When he does come to bed, it's late. He keeps his distance, turning away from me. What scares me isn't just that he might be betraying me. What terrifies me is that I'm losing him, and I don't know why. I've done nothing wrong, yet I'm being punished. The question haunts me. Who's stealing his heart? I may not be a detective, but I find answers through my lens. And I will find this one, no matter what it costs me. I've photographed hundreds of couples, capturing their intimate moments. I know what real connection looks like, and what forced smiles hide. Yet watching my own husband of 20-plus years show signs of deception felt like having my lungs crushed. Derek's schedule changed without warning. Early departures, late arrivals, always with the same explanation. Client emergency meeting. After the third consecutive week, I noticed the pattern. He'd shower immediately after coming home, sometimes at midnight. Once, his hair was still damp when he slipped into bed at 11:30, claiming he'd just left the office. "You showered at work?" I asked casually. "No, I spilled coffee. Had to rinse my hair in the bathroom sink," he said, turning away. He started wearing a new cologne, something with sandalwood notes, more expensive than his usual scent. His wardrobe expanded. Designer shoes appeared in his trunk, still in boxes never mentioned. The breaking point came when I found our shared calendar. He'd erased our anniversary dinner plans without telling me, just deleted them as if they meant nothing. "I thought we were celebrating at La Mer this weekend," I mentioned over breakfast. He didn't look up from his phone. "Oh, that. I've got a lakeside client meeting. High-end potential investor. Can't reschedule." Every instinct in me screamed he was lying. 19 years of reading people's body language for portrait photography makes you sensitive to micro-expressions. But this wasn't a client. This was my husband. Then I saw the text notification flash across his locked phone screen. "VM, meet at our usual spot." Before I could process it, he snatched the phone away. "Who's VM?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice neutral. "Valerie Maddox," he replied too quickly. "Gregory's wife. She's handling some client hospitality arrangements." But Gregory Maddox's wife wasn't spearheading client relations. She was a former model who spent most of her time at the country club spa. That night, I crossed a line I never thought I would. While Derek showered, I reinstalled the Life 360 app on his phone using our shared account. Over the next week, I pieced together a disturbing pattern. 3 times he stopped near Lake Allatoona, nowhere near the office address despite claiming he was working late. Each evening, his Google Maps history was wiped clean. As a photographer who travels extensively, I recognized a deliberate trail removal. As a wife, it felt like watching someone methodically stab me. Last Saturday morning, Derek stood in our kitchen wearing his new sailing outfit I'd never seen before. "Going to the office again?" I asked. "Yeah, just a quick meeting, then golf with Nathan. Back tomorrow." He kissed my cheek lightly, the obligatory peck that had replaced our once passionate goodbyes. 20 minutes after he left, I checked Find My iPhone. His location showed paused at 7:55 a.m. I logged into our iCloud account, another shared password he apparently forgot about. His iPhone pinged from the northern shore of Lake Allatoona, in a secluded cove 40 minutes from his office. I knew that area. It wasn't residential or commercial, just a hidden inlet, accessible only by private boat, popular among the county's wealthy for discreet gatherings. I'd photographed a charity regatta there 3 years ago. The memory of Gregory Maddox's yacht, white with navy trim, flashed in my mind. Standing in our kitchen, staring at that blue location dot, something inside me broke. After years of respecting boundaries, after believing marriage meant trust above all, I made a decision that would change everything. I packed my drone in its case, the DJI Mavic 3 with extended battery, maximum flight time of 46 minutes, range of nearly 8 miles. The camera could capture clear images from 400 feet, the legal ceiling for unmanned aircraft. I'd need to launch from the public boat ramp 2 miles from the cove, keep over water to avoid trespassing, and maintain legal altitude. I left my phone on the bedroom nightstand, a basic counter-surveillance move. If Derek checked my location, he'd see I was home. My work phone would forward any calls. The drive to the lake felt surreal. 19 years of photography sessions, and here I was surveilling my own husband. Part of me hoped I'd find nothing, that he was simply meeting a client, that my paranoia had poisoned my marriage. I parked my SUV at the abandoned boat ramp, assembled the drone, and calibrated the controls. The propellers hummed to life, then the small aircraft rose above the trees, camera feed clear on my controller screen. As I guided it toward the cove, my hands remained steady, the same calm I maintained at challenging photo shoots. Inside, though, I was disintegrating. What would I see? Derek golfing innocently? Or something that would destroy 20 years of love and trust? The drone cleared the last stand of pines. The blue expanse of Lake Allatoona spread before me on the screen. I navigated toward the hidden cove, maintaining altitude, my training overriding my emotions. The shoreline came into view, then a white boat. A large white yacht with dark trim. People on deck. "Don't let it be him," I whispered, zooming the camera. "Please, God, don't let it be Derek." The image sharpened. My thumb hovered over the controller. I would not look away. Whatever waited in that cove would either end my suspicions or my marriage, and I was ready to know. Cooper's Branch boat launch wasn't much, just a cracked concrete ramp sloping into murky water, surrounded by pine trees and forgotten beer cans, perfect for my purposes. No cameras, no witnesses, just an occasional fisherman who wouldn't look twice at a woman with photography equipment. I set up my equipment with mechanical precision. The same methodical approach I'd use at a high-stakes wedding shoot. Antenna positioned for maximum range. Laptop connected to the drone controller. Flight path mapped to avoid restricted airspace. My hands moved automatically while my mind screamed. "Sat one of those camera drones?" I turned to see a young man, maybe 30, holding the hand of a little girl with pigtails. They'd been collecting shells along the shoreline. "Yes, just doing some practice flights," I answered, forcing a smile. "Cool! Mia, look at the robot bird!" The little girl giggled, waving at my drone. "Does it go very far?" the man asked. "About 8 miles in good conditions," I replied, adjusting my settings. "That's amazing! We're Mark and Mia, by the way." I nodded, not offering my name. They didn't need to know they were witnessing a marriage's autopsy. After they wandered back to their shell collecting, I double-checked everything. Battery at 100%. GoPro recording to onboard memory. GPS tracking solid. Controller signal strong. If there was anything I'd learned in photography, it was to never rush preparation. What would I say if Derek spotted the drone? What if Gregory Maddox recognized it as mine? He'd seen it at company picnics when I was still invited. I slipped on my FPV goggles, took a deep breath, and launched. The drone rose silently, hovered momentarily, then shot forward over the lake surface. The controller felt cold in my sweating hands. The cove appeared on my screen. A horseshoe-shaped inlet sheltered by overhanging trees. I slowed the drone, adjusted altitude to remain legal but get a clear view. 2 boats were anchored side by side, a large white yacht with navy trim and a smaller speedboat. Music drifted through my headphones, along with laughter. I zoomed in, heart pounding against my ribs, and there he was, my husband of 22 years, wearing swimming trunks I'd never seen, sitting on the yacht's rear deck. His arm was draped around Valerie Maddox's shoulders. Her hand rested on his thigh. 19 years of capturing emotional moments had not prepared me for this. The physical pain was immediate, like someone had driven an ice pick through my chest. My hands trembled as I adjusted the focus. They weren't alone. Nathan Turner was there, predictably, sprawled across a deck chair in expensive sunglasses. 2 women I didn't recognize were mixing drinks at a small bar. Everyone held glasses. A small mirror on the table reflected sunlight and what looked distinctly like lines of white powder. I watched in paralyzed silence as Derek climbed onto Valerie's lap, wrapped his arms around her neck, and kissed her. Not a quick peck. A deep, passionate kiss that seemed to last forever. He'd stopped kissing me like that years ago. It wasn't just the betrayal that froze my blood. It was how comfortable he looked. How practiced. This wasn't a first-time transgression, this was a routine. There he was. The man who shared my bed, my name, my life, freely giving himself to another woman in broad daylight. The man who complained about our finances while his partner could afford a yacht that probably cost more than our house. The man who told me I was paranoid when I questioned his late nights. Was I just a convenience to him now? A housekeeper? The reliable backup plan if his affair collapsed? A flash of movement caught my eye. Nathan was pointing toward the sky, toward my drone. And then Derek's face turned upward, eyes squinting. My stomach dropped. I quickly killed the transmission signal, disabled GPS tracking, and initiated return-to-home programming. No need for stealth now. I needed it back fast. As the drone sped toward me, my work phone vibrated. Derek's number flashed on the screen. I waited until the 5th ring before answering. "Hey?" I said, as if I were lounging at home, as if my world hadn't just imploded. "Hi, babe." His voice sounded artificially cheerful. "What are you up to?" "Just editing the Johnson wedding photos in the office." I lied, watching the drone approach over the water. Thought I'd finish them while the house is quiet. "That sounds productive." A pause. Wind rustled through his microphone. Boat engine noise. "Did you get that drone battery charged yet?" "Still charging," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. "Might take it up tonight, if the weather holds." Another pause. I could almost hear his mind working, calculating whether I could have possibly been flying over the lake. "Well, don't stay up too late with your cameras. I'll be home tomorrow evening, and we can talk about that anniversary dinner you wanted." Such casual deception. So effortless. How many times had I eaten dinner across from him, believing his stories about client meetings and golf games while he was planning his next rendezvous? "Sure thing," I replied as the drone landed beside me. "Have fun with Nathan. Love you." "You too," he said, the words hollow and meaningless, ending the call. I sat immobile on the rotting dock, methodically packing away my equipment. The little girl, Mia, was building a sandcastle nearby. Her father, Mark, glanced my way, something like recognition in his eyes, the look of someone who knows grief when they see it. "Are you okay, miss?" Mia asked, wandering over. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Mark approached, gently pulling his daughter back. "Come on, sweetie, let's give the lady some space." To me, he added softly, "Whatever it is, I'm sorry." As they walked away, I stared at the lake's surface, watching ripples dissolve into nothing. 22 years of marriage disappearing just as quickly. My chest felt hollow, my mind eerily calm, the same detachment I'd experienced when photographing disaster areas after Hurricane Irene. But I knew this eerie calm wouldn't last. Soon the pain would come crashing in. The rage. The humiliation. I looked down at my wedding ring, a simple platinum band that had never left my finger since the day Derek placed it there. I twisted it once, twice. It didn't feel like mine anymore. I wasn't anyone's wife now. I was just a woman on a dock with undeniable evidence of betrayal saved to a memory card. A photographer who had finally captured her most painful truth. But I wasn't a victim. Not anymore. And I certainly wasn't going to silently accept this ending he had planned for us. I stood up, squared my shoulders, and made my decision. If Derek wanted a war, I would give him one. But first, I needed to talk to a lawyer. I drove home in a fog, muscle memory navigating turns while my mind replayed those images on the yacht. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Having a great time with Nathan. Tomorrow evening coming home late. Don't wait up." I read it and set the phone down without responding. Our house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a stage set. I moved through rooms mechanically, seeing everything differently. The framed wedding photos on the mantel, the king-sized bed we'd chosen together, our daughter Lily's empty bedroom. All of it suddenly felt like an elaborate facade. Props arranged to create the illusion of a happy marriage. I pulled out my old camera equipment case from the studio. Essential paperwork first. Birth certificate, insurance policies, banking documents, property deed. Next, clothes enough for a week, my laptop and external hard drives containing the drone footage, the antique cameras my father left me. I worked methodically, silently, like I was packing for a destination shoot rather than dismantling my life. By midnight, the bag sat ready by the door. I poured a glass of wine, walked onto the back deck, and made a call to Madison Brooks. Madison and I had started our photography businesses together before she switched to corporate law. We still met monthly for wine nights. "It's late, Cassie," she answered, voice gruff with sleep. "Need a favor, Mads?" My voice sounded strange, even to me. "What's wrong?" Immediately alert, the attorney in her never completely disappeared. "Marriage is over. Need somewhere quiet to land for a bit." A pause. "The lake house is just sitting empty. Has power, water, internet. Not fancy, but it's clean." "Perfect. What's the rent?" "Don't insult me. Stay as long as you need. Hell, I've been thinking about selling that parcel anyway. Might give you first dibs if you're interested." "Might be," I replied, surprising myself. "I'll text you the address. Gate code 1775. I'll leave the key under the propane tank." I ended the call, finished my wine, and wrote a single line on a sticky note. "I need time." I placed it on the kitchen counter where Derek would find it. The next morning, I called and canceled all my upcoming photography sessions for the first time in 15 years, loaded my SUV, and drove away without looking back. Madison's property sat at the dead end of Hardin Bridge Road, 3 acres of pines and hardwoods sloping down to the Edisto River. The lake house gleamed in the clearing, its wide windows reflecting dappled sunlight. I settled in quickly. The house was small but functional. Kitchen area, sitting space with a river view, bedroom in the back. The riverside deck Madison had built offered more living space than the house itself. I spent that first day sitting on the deck, watching the river flow, feeling oddly weightless. 3 days passed in near silence. I answered texts from clients with brief, non-committal responses. Derek called 17 times. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to tearful. I listened to each one, feeling nothing but a strange detachment. He didn't know where I was. I disabled location sharing on my phone before leaving. On the 4th day, my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Mark from the lake. Got your number from the photography business card you left on the dock. Just checking if you're okay." I stared at the message, surprised by the warm feeling it produced. I responded, "I'm okay. Thanks for asking." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Mia wants to know if your robot bird is feeling better." Despite everything, I smiled. "The robot bird is fine. Tell Mia thanks." Another pause. Then, "We're grilling by the river tonight. Barnett Shoals area. You're welcome to join if you need company." I surprised myself by accepting. That evening, I found them at a public picnic area. Mark setting up a portable grill, while Mia collected sticks for a small fire pit. The little girl squealed when she saw me, running over to ask about the drone. "Maybe I'll bring it next time," I promised, helping Mark with the grill. We roasted hot dogs and marshmallows, and for a few hours I almost forgot the gaping wound where my marriage had been. Mia fell asleep on a camping chair wrapped in a blanket while Mark and I talked quietly by the dying fire. "Want to tell me what happened at the lake?" he asked finally. I hesitated, then gave him the condensed version. He listened without interrupting. "That's rough," he said when I finished. "What's your next move?" "Divorce," I replied, the word still strange in my mouth. "I called a friend yesterday, Amanda Grant. She's a divorce attorney now." "Good. Clean break is best. That's what I want. Split everything down the middle. I just want out." The next morning, I met Amanda at her small private practice office. She listened to my story, expression growing grimmer. "You have footage?" she asked. I nodded, pulling out a flash drive. "Everything's there, date and time stamped, GPS coordinates embedded." She plugged it in, watched 30 seconds, and stopped it. "Jesus, Cassie, this is pretty damning." "I know. Do you want to use it?" "Not unless we have to. I just want a clean divorce. Fair split of assets, no alimony either way. I keep my business, he keeps his partnership." Amanda made notes. "That's reasonable, but be prepared. If he contests, this could get ugly." "He won't," I said confidently. "He wants his freedom as much as I want mine." 2 days later, Mark texted asking if Mia and he could see where the robot bird lived. I gave them directions to Madison's property. They arrived bearing homemade cookies and fishing poles. While Mia explored the riverbank under my watchful eye, Mark spoke quietly. I should tell you something. My sister works in financial intelligence. She mentioned once that there were rumors about Maddox accounting, something about property flips that didn't add up, money laundering. I nodded, understanding dawning. Nothing proven, but these lake parties? They're not just for fun, it's where deals happen, connections get made. You think Derek's involved? I asked. I don't know, but be careful. People with that kind of money don't like loose ends. That night after they left, I sat on the deck watching fireflies rise from the darkening grassland. I thought about what Mark had said. Was Derek a willing participant in something illegal, or had he gotten in too deep with dangerous people? For a brief moment, protectiveness flared, the instinct to shield him, warn him. Then I remembered him on Valerie's lap, kissing her with practiced familiarity. Whatever he was involved in, he'd chosen it with open eyes. I heated water for tea on the small stove, put on some soft jazz, and opened a dog-eared paperback I'd been meaning to finish for months. The river murmured outside, a soothing constant. For the first time since seeing that drone footage, I felt something like peace. Not happiness. That would take longer, but a quiet certainty that I was on the right path. I'd lost my husband, but in this small lake house by the river, I was finding myself again. And somehow, that felt like enough for now. The call came at 6:15 a.m. as I was setting up for a sunrise shoot, my first photography job since leaving. Lillian Bennett, 30 years in the district attorney's office, my mentor when I first started court photography, rarely called this early. Cassie, you need to contact Naomi Briggs over at Financial Crimes, she said without preamble, voice tight with tension. What's this about, Lillian? A pause. Best she tells you herself. Use your personal cell, not your business line. The hairs on my neck stood up. Lillian wasn't one for cloak and dagger, unless something serious was brewing. I called Naomi from my car. She answered on the first ring. Cassie Hayes? I've been hoping you'd contact me. Can we meet privately? 2 hours later, we sat in the back corner of Garrison's coffee shop, far from windows and other patrons. Naomi Briggs was mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the focused intensity of someone who'd spent years pursuing difficult cases. I'm running point on an investigation into Maddox accounting, she said after scanning the room. Money laundering through property flips, tax evasion schemes for wealthy clients, illegal offshore accounts. The coffee in my hand suddenly tasted like metal. And Derek? We've had him under surveillance for about 10 weeks. I slid my phone across the table. You'll want to see this. She watched the drone footage, expression hardening. When it ended, she looked up. You filmed this yourself? I nodded. Do you realize what you've done? This identifies at least 4 high-value targets we've been tracking. How did you know? I didn't, I said quietly. I was just a wife confirming her husband's affair. She studied me like evidence at a crime scene. You may have just exposed your husband and helped bring down a criminal organization in one move. I felt no triumph, only a hollow certainty. Gregory Maddox uses his yacht for more than parties, Naomi continued. Those lake gatherings? That's where they network with potential clients for money laundering services, introduce new accountants to the operation. And Derek, Naomi hesitated, he's a recruiter, brings in new clients, coaches them on how to structure their finances to avoid detection. His partner's wife, Valerie, handles the social side, entertainment, drugs, making connections with other wealthy individuals. My stomach clenched. How deep is he in this? Deep enough to face federal charges. But if he cooperates, testifies against Maddox. He won't, I interrupted. He's too loyal to him. Maybe, but we're moving soon. You should know he's on our target list. I thanked Naomi, promised to keep the investigation confidential, and drove to the river in a daze. The man I'd built a life with was not just an unfaithful husband. He was potentially a criminal. I couldn't reconcile the Derek who'd held my hand through Lily's birth with someone who helped wealthy clients hide money from the government. 5 days later, Naomi called again. Your husband came in this morning. Her voice held disbelief. Walked right into our office. Asked to make a statement. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of statement? Full confession. Names, dates, locations. He's been writing it all night. 12 pages so far. Detailing every client, every transaction. In exchange for what? That's the thing, Naomi said. He's not asking for a deal. Said he just wants to pay for what he did to his wife. I sat on the riverbank, watching a heron stockfish in the shallows, trying to process this. Had Derek known he was being investigated? Had my disappearance triggered some kind of remorse? Are you going to press for maximum charges? Naomi asked. No, I said after a long pause. But I won't ask for leniency either. Understood? She paused. For what it's worth, I think he truly regrets what he did to you. Not enough to stop, I replied. Not until he got caught. That night, Mark and Mia came over with a homemade casserole. While Mia explored the riverbank collecting magic rocks, Mark and I sat on the deck. You look like you've seen a ghost, he observed, pouring me iced tea. I told him what had happened. He listened without interruption. I'm sorry, he said when I finished. Finding out your husband is unfaithful is hard enough. Discovering he's mixed up in something criminal. I keep wondering if I should have seen it earlier. There were signs. He shook his head. Don't do that to yourself. You can't prevent someone else's choices. Voice of experience? I asked. He gave a small, rueful smile. My ex-wife started embezzling from her company while we were married. I had no idea until FBI agents showed up at our door at 5 a.m. What did you do? Grabbed Mia and ran. Lost everything. House, savings, reputation. People in town treated me like I must have known. Must have been involved. He twisted his glass in his hands. Took 3 years to rebuild my life. I studied his face in the fading light. The quiet strength there. The hard-won peace. We both loved the wrong people, I said. But we survived, he replied. And when my hand found his, he didn't pull away. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into making the lake house truly mine. Redecorated the living room, built shelves for my photography books, fixed the leaky shower. Each completed project felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Madison stopped by one afternoon, watching me hang framed photographs I'd taken over the years. You know, she said casually, I've been thinking about selling this whole parcel. 3 acres, including the boathouse up the hill. How much? I asked, surprising myself. She named a figure well below market value. The boathouse would make a good darkroom for film photography, she added. That night, I called my bank about a home loan. The next morning, I visited an attorney to draw up a purchase agreement. For the first time in months, I was making plans that felt entirely my own. Mark began spending more time at the lake house. He'd arrive with groceries, cook dinner while I edited photos. Mia would run wild through the meadow, collecting wildflowers, chasing butterflies. We weren't living together, not yet. But something was growing between us, tentative, honest, and utterly unlike the collapsing structure of my marriage. I've been thinking, he said one evening as we watched fireflies rise over the river. I could plant a garden here in the spring. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs. I'd like that, I replied, meaning more than just the garden. The following Monday, Naomi called with an update. Search warrants were being prepared for all Maddox accounting files. Arrests would follow within days. Derek was cooperating fully, providing evidence that would likely send Gregory Maddox away for decades. I hung up and immediately called Amanda Grant. File the divorce papers tomorrow morning, I instructed. Let's make it official before this investigation goes public. Already prepared, she assured me. I'll have them on the judge's desk by 9. That night I sat by the river, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The lake house glowed warm behind me. Somewhere in a federal building, Derek was facing the consequences of his choices. Soon the comfortable life we'd built would be dismantled piece by piece. The house sold, possessions divided, memories boxed away. Yet for the first time in months, I felt no dread at the week ahead. The truth was coming to light. Justice, messy and imperfect, was proceeding, and I was no longer standing alone in the darkness, waiting for answers that would never come. I was building something new, and somehow that felt exactly right. At 10:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in July, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. It's done. Both matters resolved. 2 parallel conclusions delivered in 4 words. Derek had pleaded guilty to 6 charges: conspiracy to commit money laundering, tax fraud, and wire fraud. The judge had sentenced him to 18 months in federal prison, a $50,000 fine, revocation of his accounting license, and a lifetime industry ban. Simultaneously, our divorce was finalized. 21 years of marriage dissolved by a judge's signature. I was sitting by the river with Mark when the message came. We'd been drinking coffee, watching the morning mist rise off the water. Neither of us saying much. I handed him my phone without comment. He read it, then looked at me, searching my face. How do you feel? I considered the question, genuinely curious about the answer myself. There was no surge of triumph, no bitter satisfaction, just a quiet certainty, like the final period at the end of a long, difficult book. Free, I said finally. It feels like being free. He nodded, understanding immediately what most wouldn't, that freedom isn't always jubilant. Sometimes it's just the absence of chains you've carried so long you'd forgotten their weight. He placed his hand on my shoulder, warm and steady. We sat watching the river flow, marking the moment not with words but with silence. The next day I staked out the foundation for a small photography studio. Nothing extravagant, just a simple timber structure with north-facing windows and space for both digital equipment and traditional darkroom setup. I'd never built anything larger than a bookshelf, but there was satisfaction in learning as I went, in making mistakes and correcting them, in seeing progress measured in nail by nail, board by board. Mark brought Mia most evenings after work. While I sawed and hammered, they planted a garden, tomatoes, beans, herbs, in neat rows. Mia created rock borders and insisted on naming each plant. The girl who once couldn't look me in the eye now ran to me the moment they arrived, eager to show me her latest drawing or rock collection. "Look, Miss Cassie, I found a heart rock for your new photo house." I kept every stone she gave me, lining them along the studio's windowsills. In the boathouse Madison had included with the property, I set up my photography business again. Word spread quickly through my old client network that I was offering simplified packages: weddings, family portraits, real estate. My first booking came from Lillian Bennett's daughter. Engagement photos. Lillian hand-delivered the check. "The photography world misses you," she said, glancing around at my riverside home. "But I can see why you'd prefer this." "I might return to bigger projects someday," I replied, not entirely convinced. "But right now, I need to build something instead of just capturing what others have." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Well, when you're ready, there's always a place for your work in my daughter's album." 3 months after the divorce, a letter arrived from the Federal Corrections Institution, Derek's handwriting on the envelope. I sat on the porch steps for nearly an hour before opening it. "Cassie, I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it and wouldn't know what to do with it if offered. I just want you to know that I remember who I was before greed hollowed me out. I remember loving you honestly once. I remember the woman who stayed up all night editing photos to meet deadlines, who built her business from nothing, who never missed capturing the perfect light. Whatever you believe now, those memories are real. I hope someday you find someone who loves you the way I should have. Derek!" I read it twice, then walked to the fire pit where embers still glowed from the evening's cookout. I dropped the letter in and watched it curl and blacken. Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed to carry those words with me. As summer faded into fall, the studio took shape. Mark began leaving clothes in the guest room. Mia claimed a corner of the loft as her special reading nook. We settled into a rhythm that felt natural, unforced. No dramatic declarations, no elaborate promises, just daily choices to remain, to build together. One crisp October evening, we sat around the fire pit, Mia asleep in a camp chair bundled in blankets, the studio's frame silhouetted against the darkening sky. "You know," Mark said, watching the flames, "I don't need marriage again. But if I stay with you, and I want to stay, I'll choose it every day. That's all I can promise." I pulled him closer, wrapped my arm around his shoulders. At 43, I learned that the most important promises weren't spoken in ceremonial moments, but lived out in quiet, consistent actions, in showing up, in remaining when it would be easier to leave. "That's all I need," I replied. The next morning, I stood on the newly built porch of the studio, coffee steam rising in the cool air. The river flowed steadily below, indifferent to human suffering or human joy, continuing as it had for thousands of years before my heartbreak and would for thousands after. I pulled out my drone controller, no longer an instrument of surveillance but a tool for creation. The aircraft rose smoothly into the clear blue sky, camera capturing not betrayal or loss, but possibility. A small studio taking shape, a garden with neat rows, 2 Adirondack chairs on a porch facing the water. From above, it looked like what it was becoming, a home, not the one I'd planned, but perhaps the one I needed. "Everything is beginning," I thought, watching the drone's smooth flight. And this time, I won't miss a moment of it. If you've ever felt that sinking feeling when something isn't right in your relationship, I see you. I understand the pain of discovering betrayal in the place you least expect it, from the person who promised to love you forever. But I also know the strength that comes after. The peace that finds you when you start building a life that's truly yours. Sometimes the most beautiful photographs come after the darkest storms. And sometimes the most authentic love arrives after you've learned to love yourself first. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please share your own journey in the comments. Your words might be the light someone else needs right now. Until next time, this is Cassie Hayes, reminding you that your story isn't over. The best chapters might be the ones you haven't written yet.